Hello. Hello and welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. I'm Steve Marks. I'm chair of CMC's Board of Trustees and president of Hannah News Service here in Columbus. It's great to see everyone today. CMC is pleased to present today's forum, Small Business Big Deal, sponsored by Rama Consulting Group and King Business Interiors, each represented here by many friends and associates. Won't you please help me thank them? Small businesses like coffee shops, food trucks, microbreweries, and bookstores add flavor to a community, and Columbus residents know that these are the things that make our city special. We don't often think about the impact these local businesses have on the economy, but when we spend money at local businesses, that money stays here. Considering the many small businesses we can think of, it seems promising. But we actually start and grow small businesses slower than other areas in the Midwest and much slower than the coast, meaning that there is room for and a need to improve. Let's welcome our experts today. Small business ecosystem builder and chief architect of the Columbus Small Business Agenda, Henry Gulott with the City of Columbus. Founder and CEO of the Economic and Community Development Institute, Ina Kinney. I love this name. Co-founder of Bake Me Happy, LLC, Letha Pugh. And our host, journalist at Columbus Business First, Carrie Ghosh. But first, Bill Lafayette, our resident economist and founder of his firm, Regionomics, will start us off with opening remarks, then turned over to Carrie to host. Bill, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, and many thanks to the Columbus Metropolitan Club for inviting me to weigh in on this important topic. And my job right now is to explain why it's important. Everybody recognizes that it's important to support and grow high-tech startup businesses, because once these businesses get rooted, they attract top talent, pay high wages, and sell to a national or an international audience, which brings dollars into the region. That's all very true. But many economic developers generally ignore other types of startups, retailers and restaurants, for example. The argument runs that these businesses just circulate dollars that are already in the local economy, and so they don't add to the region's wealth. But this argument is not always true. Locally owned, locally serving stores and restaurants trap wealth that would otherwise leave the economy. And that's because most local businesses deal with local suppliers. Their spending becomes income for these supplier businesses, and it creates additional economic activity. We call this a multiplier effect. On the other hand, a typical chain centralizes its suppliers of merchandise and business services. Those dollars leave the Columbus economy immediately, and their multiplier impact is zero. Additionally, the profits and the salaries of the top managers of those chain businesses go to wherever the chain is located, or worldwide if the chain's publicly traded. On the other hand, the salaries and profits of local businesses stay local and support the household spending of the owners and managers. And that difference winds up being really significant. Chain retailers, on average, trap only 14 cents of every sales dollar for at least one additional round of spending. Locally owned retailers trap 48 cents of every dollar for additional local spending. Chain restaurants trap only 30 cents. Locally owned restaurants trap 65 cents. Those trapped dollars grow jobs and income and wealth here in Central Ohio. The dollars that leave the local economy grow jobs and income and wealth, but somewhere else. From an economic standpoint, blocking wealth that would otherwise leave the local economy is exactly the same as bringing wealth in. Now, as I hope most of you know, Columbus is not doing at all well in small business formation and growth. I first brought this issue up when I released my 2014 economic forecast here at CMC, and unfortunately, things have not gotten any better since then. Out of the 100 largest metro areas in the U.S., Columbus ranks 86th in the percentage of workers who are self-employed, 86th in the concentration of small businesses, and I'm defining small businesses here as those with fewer than 20 employees, and we rank 74th in our small business birth rate. Indications are that tech startups are doing well here in Central Ohio, but tech is only a small sliver of the overall startup market and is basically a different animal. All of that means that small businesses, including locally owned retailers and restaurants, are far fewer than average here, and they get started at a much slower rate. That means that our retail purchases have a smaller impact on output, income, jobs, and wealth in Columbus than average, smaller than they should. Why this weakness? Well, I've been scratching my head over that question ever since I first noticed the problem. Basic characteristics like industry structure, economic growth, population growth, and demographics don't explain it. But I've found two characteristics that do. One is the percentage of foreign-born people in the region. All else equal, the more immigrants, the better the small business starts. The other is the number of very large businesses, businesses with 100 employees or more as a percentage of all businesses. The higher that percentage, the lower the self-employment rate and the small business birth rate, all else equal. Our share of immigrants is improving, but is still lower than average. And our concentration of very large businesses is among the highest of all 100 metros. The resources to help entrepreneurs in Columbus are definitely out there, but they need to be better publicized than they are. One way to address the problem is to showcase these resources. And that, folks, is why this forum is so important. So I'm eager to hear how this conversation proceeds. So, Carrie, have at it.
Thank you, Bill.
So, the CMC's done a new thing where they let people submit questions when you register, and we got a really great one. What are ways to help small businesses connect with accountants, legal services, planners, all the professional services that a small business would need? Ina, I think you know the answer to that question.
Come to ECDI. Hi, my name is Ina Kinney. I'm the founder and CEO of Economic and Community Development Institute. Actually, today is 46 years ago today my family came to the United States. My son actually called me this morning and told me that. We were the first family resettled from the former Soviet Union. So when Dr. Lafayette, our friend Dr. Lafayette, thank you, Bill, for talking about immigrants in communities, we were one of the first that came here. And one of the reasons why I started ECDI in 2004 is to address the needs of communities such as immigrants, women, minorities who do not have access to services to start their business. So ECDI, what do? We are a statewide organization. We focus on education, we focus on investments, and we focus on innovation. We provide training, technical assistance, which is exactly what Carrie was just mentioning, and resources to businesses, whether they're startups or existing. We provide capital, which is very critical, especially for those businesses that do not have access to resources. We know that, we deal with Main Street businesses. That's the lifeblood of our economy. Main Street businesses oftentimes do not have access to same financial resources that larger businesses do. This is where ECDI comes into play. We finance these businesses. Our loans start at $750. We go up to $350,000. We're the third largest SBA lender right now, microlender in the country. Does anybody know what a microloan is? Microloans started in Bangladesh, $20 loans. They would give them to women to, buy flowers so they could sell them to, go door to door. Microlending in the United States has not really taken off until ECDI came about. That's a joke. But, our loans start small. Somebody to just register their business, and then the people come back to us, and they come back time and time again, and then we make them bankable so we can refer them to our banking partners, and we have many of them here in the room. We have Chase, we have U.S. Bank, we have Huntington. So, ECDI is there to help those individuals to just get going, and also those individuals that already have businesses that still have problems getting finances, such as food-based businesses. We know that banks, I think restaurants, 2 out of 3 restaurants fail? So, this is where we come in. I think 40% of our businesses are food-based businesses. I don't know if you guys know, but, we were instrumental in getting the food trucks industry started in Columbus. We have Food Fort. Anybody heard of Food Fort? Come on. So, it's a commercial kitchen, a big facility where we have food trucks, and they're all over the city. I think stories are really important. Am I good with time? Okay, perfect. Okay, because, stories are really important. So let me tell you a couple of stories. Have anybody heard of, Harvest Pizza? Harvest Pizza, yeah? Well, guess what? Chris Crater came to ECDI about 10 years ago. Has it been 10 years? Probably 10 years, right? And he wanted to start his first Harvest Pizza restaurant. It was in German Village. He went to a bank. Well, bank he didn't have anything. You know what his collateral was? He had like an old beat-up truck. So that was his collateral, but guess what? We took a chance on him. So where's Chris right now? Chris has Harvest Pizzas all over Columbus, Cincinnati, and guess what? We're still giving him money to this day. And I think this helps because we have great supporters like Marilyn Brown. Commissioner Brown is here in the room. I wanted to thank the commissioner and the county because they support ECDI and our mission. We have City of Columbus that supports ECDI and our mission. Without our supporters, our partners, our bankers, financial institutions, we would not be where we are right now. Let me give you just real quick. Oh.
I got to ask Henry a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, that's what I was saying.
We'll talk about this. We agree.
This is my, I haven't done this.
So, Henry, in December, the city, after completing a study of what needs to be done to help small business, launched a new strategy. So a couple of months into the new year, how's it going?
So thank you for the question. The city of Columbus has been very intentional around its efforts to what I consider to be collateralizing its investments in small businesses. And oftentimes what you find is cities are not, municipalities, I'll just put it that way, are not as willing, I should say, to invest in small businesses because of the risk associated with them. But what we're doing now is we're collateralizing that risk, bringing partners closer together. So the work is really going really well. We're 90 days, we're on our 90-day clock in terms of looking at what can be done in a short period of time. We've formalized working groups around certain issues, and so what has come up is some of what you talked about in Dr. Lafayette's earlier introductions around making sure people know what resources are available. We found that most of the entrepreneurs in the city and even small businesses that are there get a lot of assistance when it comes to getting started. It's not that hard to really get started in a business. You can, form a LLC or be a sole proprietor and, pretty well get off to the races with it. But where we are finding the real sweet spot or the problem area is around scaling businesses. And we talk about minority businesses as well as Main Street businesses. And so we are really working in that regard. We've got a robust process and framework that we've rolled out in the small business agenda that actually brings along partners such as ECDI and the Finance Fund and others to work with us hand in hand, not just from a funding risk perspective, but also as a partner. And part of that work is being undertaken by what we are calling ecosystem builders. And today we are fortunate to have several of our ecosystem builders here with us today. And I'd ask if they would stand and just at least be recognized for their work and hard work with us here today. Sadiqa and Jackie and some of the others, would you please stand? Thank you.
And everyone, congratulate Letha. Over the weekend, the Ohio Restaurant Association named her the Rising Star Award for the whole state. So we need to know the birth of that star. So 2014, you started a bakery because your wife couldn't go out, and that's so sweet. And you go from one small bakery to the space next door, make it a whole coffee shop. Now you're part of a restaurant empire that's going to bring us yummy burgers all over town. So what resources were there for you when the two of you started?
There were a number of resources. We actually started in a business incubator through ARC Industries. There were a couple of kitchens. One kitchen was specifically gluten-free, and with each hour that you rented the kitchen, you had a person that you would bring along with you when you moved to the next, phase of your business. What's interesting with that story is that I owned a home care agency at the time, and so when I sold the agency, which hindsight being 2020, I should have just bought out my business partners, but you live and you learn. I sold the agency, and we then had our startup funds. We have a freezer in our facility that we sell products from people who were still there and are still there in the business incubator. So I think sometimes that's a reminder to me when I walk in. We're trying to support them and bring them along, and I think we would not be as far along as we were if we didn't have that, our own personal seed money. We are a niche bakery. We are a disruptor to the food industry right now. And I think this year we've decided we're just going to claim it and stop walking around like, we're some weird alien people. Gluten-free is, we cook from existing ingredients. Wendy just has a knack for, her and her team for making it, taste good. We started with 1 employee. We're up to 12 employees now. And we have leaned heavily on support from the city, from Columbus State. Although I've never interacted very much with ECDI, I always knew in my back pocket that was some place I could go if I needed assistance. I'm kind of the person up here that's, Henry and I, we spend a lot of time together, and, there's policy and the intent for a city to be supportive of small businesses. And then there's the people who are really in the small businesses, and how does that policy trickle down to those folks? And I think, as more people begin to, you own your business, but do you take ownership of your business? Do you know what you need as a small business owner? And it's been a long road for us. I mean, it's been 5 years. I've made some mistakes. I've called Henry panicked, like, I need you today with an attorney, so. And he's seen me grow, I think, as a business owner. I do all the business side of Bake Me Happy. I do not bake. I do deliveries. I do dishes. I mop. But Wendy does all the creative pieces of the business. And so, the two of us together, because we are doing something we both really enjoy, I think that's what's been the key to our success. If everything was on Wendy, that's a hard road to try to be in there and producing a product and managing the books and out here, doing speaking engagements, managing staff. So, it is a lot of work. We love what we do, and I know that I feel like the city is on the right track to helping small businesses. It's been I've always felt like the intent was there, but I also feel like we're finally kind of starting to make some headway with, helping small businesses be successful.
Thank you. Bill has been canary in the coal mine with these statistics for a long time, and they seem to be pretty stubborn. You've been at it for a long time. So what progress do you feel like has been made? Like, what are your default rates like for your loans? Have you brought more banks to be willing to take on this risk?
Yeah, I mean, small businesses, the space we're in, there's going to be higher defaults. I mean, this is why banks don't get involved in the type of business we're in. Our defaults are probably right now about 7%, around 7%. Which is, fluctuates, goes up and down. I think with, threat of coronavirus, that they could go up, frankly, because that will impact small business in our community, and we need to take steps as a community to really address that, gap. Like, for instance, one of our businesses called yesterday, Dos Hermanos, and they were supposed to be at the Arnold Classic, and now, I'm glad that they're closed it up for the health reasons, but the businesses are getting affected. We do see more investments by banks. I think it's because, our history as an organization, we've been at it for 15 years. We've kind of made our mark in our local economy, serving the entire state. We have offices throughout, and I think, our outcomes speak for themselves, so I think that's what makes banks invest more in our, in ECDI. Just to give you an example, we've put 435 loans out in the last 18 months. That might not seem like a lot, but for an organization like ECDI, that, these loans take a lot of effort and time to make real for people. Imagine somebody, like you came to, you didn't have any money to start with, so you have to help somebody put together a loan package. You have to educate them. You want to make sure that, they get the right start. The problem sometimes is many businesses fail because they're underfunded. So we try to look at that and, step them up through the process. Believe it or not, our our average loan is still about $27,000. So, we do make a lot of smaller loans. We've done about $56.5 million in loans. Again, that's a lot of loans in Ohio. But I still think, like you said, Carrie, I think still there needs to be more small businesses, startups, and I think we as a community need to encourage, especially college graduates. Everybody goes into professions, especially in a city like Columbus sometimes because we have such a big corporate community. But small businesses are great. We just need to support them, and we need to shop local, and we need to make sure that the businesses that are there are getting our support. You might spend a little bit more money, but you know what? These businesses will create opportunities and create local jobs. Just one more thing and I'll be done. Dr. Lafayette did a study for us. We commissioned by MasterCard a study about 3 years ago, maybe it's 2 years ago. So this study, and we had to bring in an expert, of course, Dr. Lafayette did it. The impact, when Dr. Lafayette talked about the total impact of the work, $1 billion of economic impact, using the multiplier effect, is what ECD has been able to accomplish annually in the state of last year. So that's great, but we can do a lot more together. So I encourage all of you as professionals to volunteer, come and work with organizations. It doesn't have to be CD, obviously, but, we'll take you guys. But help people, give them advice. We need attorneys, we need accountants, we need social media people. I know you guys do some of that stuff, right? So, it's great to be able to sit there and help somebody else, because guess what? A new business started today will leave a legacy behind, and this is what we need to think about. All the businesses in Ohio right now that started in Ohio, huge businesses. Les Wexner started in Dayton, and look what he's done. So again, support local businesses, spend money at local businesses, and support ECDI too, if you can. Thank you.
A Main Street business can really change and revitalize a neighborhood. And then the folks who own the buildings that they lease notice that the neighborhood is getting a lot more desirable. And so, look at what's happened to the Short North. Except for the ones that actually own their buildings, it's all chains. Kolache Republic, Natalie's coal-fired in the, I think it was a brewery district location, and Bake Me Happy. Can you tell me a little bit of your story and what?
Heartburn there. It's of all the things that I think that small businesses deal with, it's securing your lease, beating a horse to death with access to capital. When a business signs a lease and they don't quite understand all the intricacies with it, you can really get yourself into a bad spot. I learned early on, lease space is very expensive. Commercial lease space is very expensive. And we were lucky enough to be in a space, we were on the south side, no one was really interested in the south side at the time. You're in there baking in the window, you see these drug dealers outside, and you're like, I see that guy every day. Something sneaky's going on, But then you start to see the neighborhood change, and your patrons are coming in, and you notice, things are kind of flipping. And so that's what has happened to us in Marion Village. We had an opportunity to buy the building. It fell through. The people who have the space now, just communicated to us that, a brewery wants to move in and they want your space. And I'm just like, that's nice, but I still have years on my lease, but we can talk about it. It used to be a very emotional reaction from me. And now I've learned, everything is negotiable. And, if there's an incentive that, is good for Bake Me Happy, we'll go back and we'll look at the numbers. And I think that's been a part of my growth in business. I have been an entrepreneur since like third grade. I was selling candy and doing all these things, but I didn't go to school for business. I went to nursing school, and so everything was a little more emotional for me. And, when things didn't work out, my feelings would be hurt, and, Wendy and I, we, cry on each other's shoulder. But now you reach a different level and you understand, or at least for me, when I see a building, I think, we could own that building, we could lease space to other folks, but also have some, how can we help other small businesses move ahead as well? And so I think there's been this, natural kind of growth for us that, we're working every day. I don't really think we see how well Bake Me Happy is doing. But what we see and what we want is to help other small businesses too. And so, when you have a lease and you don't have and they decide they want to, double your rent, you have to figure out, are you going to just, lay down and shut your business down? Are you going to try to move your business, which is, in and of itself is a 6 to 9 month process? Or are you going to, figure out what's best for your business and, try to get to the next level? And so it is hard. I think I've seen 3 or 4 small businesses that they can't afford, for their rent to double, and so they just closed. And so who do you even go talk to about that? Because it's a capitalist society. Anyone owns a building, they could they can, like Wendy and I were talking, they can do whatever they want with this building because we don't own it. And we have to figure out what works for us and get some outside help and some counsel to make the best decision.
Are there some, go ahead.
Yeah, so part of this process is about, for the city's perspective, is democratizing entrepreneurship. And what we mean by that is situations like Letha just described. We've got to provide ways where people of color, minority businesses, minority or people, entrepreneurs of color, I should just say it like that, it can gain access to equitable opportunities in this space. When you think about bank lending and you go back to the old redlining days, a lot of that same philosophy still carries forward in regards to how leases are drawn up, how people access capital. You wouldn't believe it, but it actually is still part of what happens. So cities and governments, as part of their responsibility in that role, serve as a real good opportunity to neutralize and kind of level that playing field to some degree. And so part of the work that we've been doing is around really setting forth a real serious agenda around how do you do this work, how do you be inclusive, how do you start out with inclusivity as part of the strategy going into the work, how do you look at neighborhoods that have been marginally and disproportionately left behind and bring in small businesses as part of that culture, that place-making opportunity for those communities, and watching the results of that play itself out. And this work is not, we're a little bit behind in regards to what other countries and other parts of the nation is actually doing in this regard. You find other cities that are really progressive in this regard. They're putting real resources, and we're thankful for the leadership of the mayor and the support of the mayor and council for getting behind us this year and really actualizing a budget and lifting it up with budget hearings and what have you. But that's the kind of work that has to be done when you want to bring a population and a group of people who have traditionally, historically been underutilized and marginalized in this, what we call American capitalistic society. And so that's what you hear and you see. We don't have access to the same resources. Minority entrepreneurs, aspiring minority entrepreneurs don't have access to the resources. They're not taught it in a way, and they certainly haven't lived it. And, so that puts us at a disadvantage when you think about how do you level that playing field. Whereas, other cultures have been, they grow up minding the store and being involved in the business transaction. So that's work that has to be done, and it's best done by cities and counties and municipalities who have at heart the best interests of the people, and should have, at least at that regard. Now, it does require some educating of those in authority around this work. It's much easier to do an incentive package and bring in, Amazon or somebody like that. It's much easier. But you don't get the impact on a neighborhood like a Bake Me Happy would have on a neighborhood. It's part of building the culture. It's part of, like I said, placemaking. It's part of the local economy. And actually, it helps to bring other big businesses to town, because when those businesses bring those 100 jobs and thousands of jobs into town, they're going to want to go to a coffee shop. They're going to want to go and buy a loaf of bread. They want to experience the culture of a city and of a community. And that's the kind of work that we're doing here. So
in 2 minutes, you all get your turn to take over my job, do it better. But so we have 2 minutes. Are there some specific policies that would help in this regard? Something that could change? Could there be a land trust for business space?
I think so. Especially when she was talking about, being, your lease rent going up, but twofold, you said, right? Mm-hmm. And you spoke to your landlord, and I think the biggest problem that we also see as an organization is folks that sign leases that they don't understand. They're signing things and this is something we deal on weekly. Somebody will call and say, hey, I have a lease and I can't get out. Or they sign a lease and all of a sudden the traffic patterns around their business change and they have no business. Mm-hmm. So how do you deal with that? So from a policy perspective, I think there needs to be something done. I mean, whether it's the city government, the county, I mean, I understand that we live in a capital society, and, landlords have their business and they have to make money as well. So I'm as stumped as everybody else, but, to me, it sounds very unfair when you have a lease and a landlord comes in and says, I'm going to double it just because he can. Something's got to, stop. And I don't know if Henry, you could have any thoughts on that.
Letha's,
sorry.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I have a whole notebook here of ideas that
Okay.
would be
Well,
helpful.
come and talk to us.
But I believe a tax credit for small businesses.
There you go.
I'll give you a perfect example. In the restaurant industry, I set a budget for payroll. I can't control how people tip employees. If they tip them excessively, because in my place they're tipping on a bakery box, not a cup of coffee, my workman's comp is increased, my unemployment is increased, and I'm looking at these numbers, and I'm thinking, what's the answer here? And my accountant's like, turn off the tip button. And I'm like, no, that's not the answer. The answer is, what's a way that the city, through some type of tax credit, could help me offset what I had not budgeted for my payroll expenses? It's those types of small, concrete things that I think, would be very helpful. I know that's a high-level change, but I have been talking with Liz Brown about this because I think there's a way, that's where I need help.
Because, you get the large corporations that come to town, they don't have to pay, taxes. And here you go, small businesses, which is that's our economy. I mean, if we don't support small businesses, what's going to happen? So it's something that we think about all the time. And I think tax credits are very important, some kind of incentives. I mean, giving people a running shot to start their business and sustain their business. It's not easy. You don't know what economy is going to bring, week to week. And especially with food-based businesses, it's tough. So that's why it's so important to go to places like hers, Make Me Happy, right?
So it's the tradition at CMC to take audience questions. So if you could step up to there's just the one microphone. State your name first. Please avoid editorializing. And remember, a question ends with a question mark. So.
Thank you for that. Henry Davis, I'm with Nationwide. I'm just curious to know that the current administration right now is making changes to the CRA, the Community Reinvestment Act, which is their goal is to help the low and moderate income areas for loaning. And from my understanding, I think that these changes that the current administration is actually doing is going to be somewhat unfavorable. So my question to the panel is that how are you going to adjust, or what kind of plans you have in order to adjust to maybe some of the unfavorable changes? And I also like to point this question to Dr. Lafayette, as he eloquently explained leakages and injections into the economy. What impact would the CRA also have on that? Thank you.
That's a good question. So go ahead and start.
Well, the CRA is a really important program. I'm actually working on a study right now of the impact of the CRA, and I'm hoping that the results are going to motivate folks to just understand that these are businesses and developments that need our support. So that, I haven't looked in detail at the changes yet, planning to, but that's going to be in the study as well, I think.
So I'll address a little bit of that. Number one, the city, from the work that we've done around the small business assessment and study, we found that CRA lending probably was, the bulk of the small business lending in the city of Columbus and for the Columbus region. to some degree outpacing CDFI type of lending as well as some of the bank lending for the area.
I don't think people know what CRA is, maybe.
Okay, so for those that don't know what CRA is, Community Reinvestment Act, in lending associated with banks being present in a location, but
Redlining.
yeah, but basically making loans outside of where their footprint and area is at. So the law requires that they make loans in an area where they are receiving their deposits, and so that's what CRA is about. But as I was saying, we have looked at that, and in our looking at the study and the data, we basically see that CRA is really a strong component of small business lending, and we need to do whatever is possible to protect that, particularly for those disinvested investors.
Yeah, and we're very much involved at a national level to ensure that CRA stays as it is, because there's been some proposals that are not necessarily as favorable to the CRA legislation, which is really critical to our communities. And certainly, we want to ensure that everybody, I mean, Henry mentioned minorities. I think 56% of the folks that we lend to are minorities, so, and women. So it's very important for us to continue to do that. Sorry. All right, that scared me.
And talkers.
Yeah, that's right.
We have another question?
Yes, I'm Chuck Lind, and I love the panel. Music to my ears. I'm all about the advocacy for the local economy. This question is probably more for Henry, but I think you referenced an assessment. Has there been a survey or some kind of assessment of what maybe the top 3 needs are for small businesses, locally owned businesses?
Certainly. So in the assessment that we just finished, I guess, in June and released the study, I'd be happy to make that available. Actually, it's available on the city's website. But basically, yes, there is a lack of, and really we looked at it according to where you're coming from in terms of geographical location. So when you think about a Linden or a Hilltop, there's a real bad lack of access to real quality space and retail space and things like that. So you can't do business if, number one, you don't have access to quality space and adequate space. You can't do it if the space is out price for you as a small business owner. So that's a piece of what we looked at, and so that's that difference. We also looked at it, and the study reveals that there's a lack of knowledge around what resources are available. As I said before, there's a plethora of resources, but knowing what those resources are and being able to really access those almost on a neighborhood level that's a problem there. And then we looked at the capital landscape in terms of how accessible is capital to people of color, women of color, entrepreneurs of color, and we uncovered that there's about a $6.9 billion gap in terms of real access to capital. That's using a multiplier effect, Dr. Lafayette, in that regard, but certainly there's a gap there as well. And so there's some other things that were uncovered, but those are the main points that we like to think about, and we are actively working toward overcoming.
One point that I think is very important to address is before anybody really starts to form a business, there is a fear factor that has to be overcome. And I certainly felt that fear factor when I started my business 9 years ago. I think I talked to some of you in the room, but I spent 6 months talking to everybody I could think of. What landmines are out there for a small business that I'm not considering, because I had never really thought about going into business for myself? And the other question, if I do this, will I starve? And so both important questions. Yeah. And so I think what we really need to do is help people to see that we business owners are just people who took a somewhat different path, and maybe it's a path that you might want to consider too. You give them the good, you give them the bad.
I know you.
Yes.
Hi, Andy Campbell. Thanks for being here, everybody. Interesting conversation. I'm wondering, Bill talked about the big business ecosystem here in Columbus. Are there some things that existing businesses can do to support small businesses, purchasing programs, that sort of things, and ways that you can connect those?
Yes, let me answer that if I may. Absolutely. In fact, I'll give you an example of our incubator, Food Fort. I mean, we have, how many food clients do we have? Terry Traster is the head of our Food Fort, our food-based incubator. 50 vendors, and they all are using the space, whether they're food trucks or caterers or bakers, whatever it may be. And listen, we sent them to Chase headquarters. Pete Mattingly is one of our board members, and they were able to put together a program where our clients are supplying and cooking and providing products for Chase headquarters. I mean, how many employees do you have there? Like 16,000? 12,000. We have people that are going to different hotels, and we talked about the convention center. For those of you that have large corporations, for cities, and gosh, you guys support us, the county support us, you have set-asides for minorities and for women. Why not, when you're purchasing food, give our businesses a try? Frankly, you guys are investing money in those loan funds for those businesses. It would make sense for you to give it back to those businesses. For those of you that have large companies, help small businesses. When you're buying food, when you're cleaning your driveways, when you're doing your windows, we have a minority contractor program where minority contractors are getting financing from us, but they still need these jobs. There's a lack of minority contractors in the city of Columbus. I don't know if you guys knew that or not, but they have lack of access to jobs. So again, if you want to support businesses, contact ECDI, contact the city, contact others, but make sure to give them an opportunity as opposed to going with a larger corporation that's going to supply you with the product.
I think, did you want to go ahead? Okay. From a small business perspective, I do see value in mentorship programs. I see value in people sharing with me, yes, you could make an offer on this building. It does seem intimidating that the building is $1 million, but did you know if the owner owns the building, maybe you can give him $500,000 and then carry the note with him. It's these little pieces of information, if you've never been exposed to it and it's not your reality, you wouldn't know. And so I wouldn't know to ask, or not ask someone that, but propose, or try to negotiate. I think helping small business owners who want to take it to the next level, I feel like we're kind of getting to that place where, we're gonna do what we're gonna do, or we're gonna, go home. There's some savviness in business. I don't understand how we have a brewery on every corner. You mean to tell me everybody has $5 million? No, somebody somewhere is giving people money. And when I sit down with the bank, and what's been helpful to us is banks come to us, and we sit together, and we spend a lot of time together. And the first thing I say is, I don't understand how everybody can open a brewery. I know there's money, but somehow I'm missing something. And if you hear our story and you talk to us, and I can be real passionate with my story, and if that doesn't hook you, then we probably shouldn't work together, because I need help, and I'm coming to you because this is one of the ways I know that I have access to capital. And if you need 100 documents from me on Tuesday, I will have them to you Monday night. So there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to, have access to the capital that we need.
We have time for one last question, and y'all have 2 minutes to answer it.
Hi, I'm Warren Fishman. I really appreciate this forum, and I appreciate you coming. I guess this question will be directed to two of you. You've had Ms. Kinney, you've had experience in loaning money since 2004, I guess. What's the percentage of people, of businesses that succeed and pay you back over that period of time?
About 95%. 95% of the businesses pay us back. I mean, some of them, don't pay us all, we have to put them on deferrals, we give them time, but, majority of people pay us back, and I think that comes with training and technical assistance, and again, it fluctuates, like 2008 and 9 were horrible for us, we lost a lot of money, but, as economy gets better, then, small businesses do better. But we do take a chance on businesses that others don't. And believe it or not, we have to borrow money in order to pay, to lend money out. So for those of you, so we talked about policy. We need more money as an organization from municipalities, from government sources in order to lend money out to the businesses. Because guess what? The more that we could put out there, the more businesses can become successful and more businesses can start or expand. We've talked about startup businesses, but expansion of businesses is as critical, if not more, because imagine if a business goes under, a lot of jobs get, go under as well. So to answer your question, that's.
30 seconds, anybody else?
You want to?
No, I guess I would just say that this kind of conversation needs to continue, and thank you for your interest in being here. We don't change this by not talking about it. We change it by having these dialogues, very intentional dialogues around what can municipalities do, what can other organizations like ECDI, what can we do better, looking at national models around what other cities are doing. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are already things that are working in other communities, and so bringing those forward.
Excellent. I hope you found today's forum inspiring and educational. As a small business owner, I try and support small business. I hope all of you will too. So let's thank our sponsors. Speaking of sponsors, Rama Consulting Group. And also King Business Interiors. And our speakers, Henry Golat, Ina Kinney, Letha Pugh, and our host, Carrie Ghosh. And let's not forget Dr. Bill Lafayette. And our special thanks to all of you. We look forward to seeing you next week at CMC. Thank you.